This happened about a year ago, but it still haunts me like a ghost with a sense of humor. My uncle passed away rather suddenly from a heart attack. It was a blow to our family. He was one of those uncles who was somehow both inappropriate and the life of the party, who gave you your first sip of beer and taught you how to properly grill a steak at age 12. Naturally, I was devastated and wanted to pay my respects at his funeral. My family is pretty big and, like many big families, not great at communication. My mom, who was grieving and overwhelmed, texted me that the funeral was on Saturday at St. Mark's at 11 a.m. That was all the info she gave. Now, where I live, a mid-sized city, there are two St. Mark's churches, one Catholic and one Lutheran, and I didn't think to ask which one. My uncle wasn't religious, so it felt weird to me that he was having any kind of church service at all, but grief logic said, don't question anything, just show up and be sad. So Saturday rolls around, and I'm running late because I can't find a matching pair of black socks, because of course I can't. I grab some that are almost black, skip breakfast, and speed across town to St. Mark's Catholic Church. I pull up at 11:07 a.m., sweating and already emotionally fragile, and rush into the building. The lobby area is empty, and I hear murmurs coming from inside the sanctuary. I assume the service has started, and I quietly open the heavy doors and slip in. It's dark, solemn, and exactly what you'd expect from a funeral. The casket is at the front, flower arrangements everywhere, and people dressed in black fill the pews. I sneak into an empty seat toward the back, trying to be as respectful as possible. I recognize no one, but that doesn't raise a red flag because I've got a big extended family I don't really know. I sit, take a deep breath, and start to tear up as the priest gives a heartfelt eulogy. He describes a man who is deeply devoted to his faith, a pillar of the community, and beloved by his congregation. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, did I know my uncle at all? As the priest goes on, I start noticing some things that don't line up. First of all, everyone around me looks way too old. I mean, sure, my uncle was in his late 60s, but this crowd looks like a bingo night at a retirement home. Second, the slideshow on the screen up front shows a man who looks nothing like my uncle. In fact, he looks like Morgan Freeman with a mustache. I freeze. At this point, I pull out my phone as discreetly as I can and text my cousin. Me, hey, I'm here. Where are you guys sitting? Cousin, we're near the front. Where are you? Me, back row. I don't see anyone I know though. Cousin, back row? Dude, we're at St. Mark's Lutheran. And just like that, the floor didn't swallow me whole, but it should have. I sat there, in horror, realizing I had crashed a complete stranger's funeral. Worse yet, I was crying. Like, visibly. I even sniffled at one point. People probably thought I was some secret second family member or a dramatic coworker. The eulogy wrapped up, and the priest invited people to come up and share memories. That's when I decided I needed to get out. But I couldn't just leave. People were standing to walk to the front and share stories, and the aisle was packed. So I did the only thing I could think of. I waited until someone stood up near me and slipped out behind them, nodding solemnly as I passed other mourners. I whispered, "I'm so sorry for your loss," to a sweet-looking older woman who clasped my hand and said, "Thank you. It means so much." I felt like a war criminal. I bolted outside and drove across town to the correct church, now 35 minutes late. I slid into a pew at the back, again, and this time I recognized people. My cousin gave me a look that said we'll talk later, and I sat through the rest of the funeral with my stomach in knots. The kicker? The Lutheran service was way more relaxed, and my uncle's best friend opened his speech with a fart joke. It was very on-brand, and somehow made my earlier emotional breakdown at the stranger's funeral even more ridiculous in hindsight. Later, I told my cousin what happened. He laughed so hard he cried. Then, because we're terrible people, we started joking about the life of other uncle, how I was his secret godson, how he visited me in dreams, how I was destined to carry on his mysterious legacy. We made up a whole backstory. It helped me feel better, but also made me realize I really need to confirm addresses before going anywhere. So yeah, I gave a stranger's grieving family emotional support, cried over a man I never met, and almost delivered a eulogy for the wrong uncle. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by attempting to impress my crush with a fancy dinner, but everything went horribly wrong. So, this happened last night, and I'm still not over it. Let me start by giving you some context. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I've been talking to this amazing girl, Emma, for the past few months. We met at a mutual friend's party, and after a few weeks of texting and hanging out in groups, we agreed to go on a one-on-one date. Now, I'm not the most confident when it comes to impressing women, and I figured the best way to win her over was to show her I'm cultured, refined, and can make her feel special. And what better way to do that than by cooking her a fancy dinner at my apartment? I've always been decent in the kitchen, but let's be honest, I'm no Gordon Ramsay. But the idea of whipping up something impressive like a steak dinner with homemade mashed potatoes and a nice bottle of wine seemed like the perfect recipe for success. I spent the entire day prepping, researching the best steak recipes, watching YouTube tutorials, and ensuring that every detail of the meal would be just right. I even picked up a nice bouquet of flowers for the table to set the mood. I wanted everything to be perfect. The evening finally came, and Emma showed up looking absolutely stunning. We exchanged pleasantries, I made a couple of awkward jokes to break the ice, and I guided her to the dining area where I had set up the table. The candles were lit, the music was playing in the background. Everything was going according to plan. I was feeling pretty confident at this point, but then things took a turn. I had prepared the steaks ahead of time and seasoned them with a blend of spices that I thought would be amazing. However, when I threw them on the grill pan, I made the rookie mistake of turning the heat up too high. I figured a higher temperature would sear the steaks perfectly, locking in all those juices and making them tender. I didn't realize that the heat was way too much, and I ended up burning the outside of the steaks while the inside was still basically raw. Panic started to creep in, but I told myself, I can fix this. I just need to finish them in the oven. I popped the steaks in the oven and then turned to the mashed potatoes. The recipe I found online called for russet potatoes, but I accidentally grabbed the wrong kind at the store, Yukon Golds instead. I didn't think it would matter much, but as I boiled them, I quickly realized that they were way more delicate than I had anticipated. The potatoes didn't mash as smoothly as I expected, and they ended up being more like a lumpy, starchy paste rather than the creamy, buttery mash I had envisioned. But I couldn't go back now. By the time the steaks came out of the oven, they were overcooked, dry, and honestly, a bit too tough to chew. But I wasn't about to throw in the towel. I set the table, tried to arrange everything in a way that looked appetizing, even though it wasn't, and brought it to the table with a forced smile. I sat down across from Emma, trying to hide the panic in my eyes. She looked at the plate, then back at me, and I could see a glimmer of hesitation. "Wow, this looks interesting," she said, her tone a little too diplomatic. She picked up her fork and cut into the steak, and I could see her struggling to chew it. She smiled through the effort, but I could tell it wasn't the reaction I was hoping for. To make matters worse, I went to pour the wine I had so carefully picked out, only to spill half the bottle onto the table. I immediately grabbed some napkins to clean it up, but in my frantic attempt to be smooth, I knocked over a candle, which tipped over and dripped hot wax onto the tablecloth. At this point, I was just trying to keep it together. I'm sure I looked like a deer in headlights. Emma, bless her heart, tried to keep the mood light. She made some jokes about the situation, but every attempt at salvaging the evening felt like a desperate effort on my part. I could tell she was being polite, but it was clear she wasn't impressed. After a few minutes of awkward chewing, she finally put her fork down and said, "You know, I really appreciate all the effort you put into this, but I think I'm going to have to pass on dessert. I'm so full already." I felt defeated. This was supposed to be the night where everything went right, where I could show her I was someone worth taking seriously. Instead, I ended up creating a disaster in the kitchen and turning what was supposed to be a romantic evening into an absolute failure. The worst part? I could tell she wasn't angry with me. She was just embarrassed for me. She politely excused herself shortly after, and I walked her to the door, where she gave me a hug, said she had a good time, and told me I shouldn't worry about the meal. But I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't coming back for round two. So yeah, I fucked up. I went all in on trying to impress her with this grand gesture, but in the end, it was a series of small, preventable mistakes that ruined the night. After she left, I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the half-eaten steak and the mess of mashed potatoes, wondering where I went wrong. I guess the lesson here is, sometimes trying too hard to impress someone can backfire, and it's better to keep things simple and genuine. But for now, I'm taking a break from cooking, at least until I can get my shit together. To anyone thinking of cooking for someone on a first date, maybe stick to something simple like pasta. Or better yet, order takeout. Trust me, it's safer. To full by accidentally sending an embarrassing text to my boss, twice. So, I, 28M, work as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. I've been there for about 3 years now, and for the most part I get along well with my team and my boss, Greg. Greg is one of those old-school, no-nonsense type of guys who's always on top of things, but has a surprisingly dry sense of humor. Honestly, he's a good boss, and he's been very supportive of my career growth, which is why I was mortified when I accidentally sent him a text that was, let's just say, very inappropriate. It all started a few days ago. It was a Tuesday morning and I was working from home. I had just wrapped up a meeting and was checking my phone while waiting for a few reports to finish loading on my laptop. I'm in a group chat with my friends, and we joke around a lot. Sometimes the conversation gets pretty raunchy. As I scrolled through the messages, I found a text from one of my friends that made me laugh out loud. It was a meme about a guy who tried to impress his girlfriend with an elaborate dinner date, but then his dog ate all the food before they could eat. The punchline of the meme was, when you try to be romantic, but your dog is a foodie. It cracked me up, and I thought it was hilarious. For some reason, I decided I wanted to share it with Greg. We've always had a pretty chill relationship, and we've shared a few jokes here and there, nothing too inappropriate, but I thought he'd find it funny. So, I opened the messaging app on my phone and searched for Greg's name in my contacts. The group chat was already open, and I clicked the first contact that popped up, Greg's name, or at least I thought it was. I didn't double-check. I just saw Greg and tapped it without thinking. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that in the heat of the moment, I had actually clicked on a completely different contact. One of my friends has a name that's very similar to Greg's. So, when I hit send, I was sending this dog meme to my friend, thinking I was sending it to my boss. I waited a few minutes, assuming Greg would reply with something like, haha, that's funny, or, nice one, send me more memes. But instead, I got a response from my friend that said, what the hell is this supposed to be? Confused, I pulled up the thread to see what was going on. That's when I realized my mistake. I had just sent the meme to my friend, who was now giving me a confused response. Mortified, I quickly deleted the message, but it was too late. The message had already been seen. I spent the next hour worrying that my friend would somehow forward the meme to other people, which could end up making it way worse than it already was. I know, it wasn't a huge deal, but I was just paranoid about being the guy who accidentally sent something inappropriate in the workplace. However, that was just the beginning of my downfall. Later that day, I received a message from Greg, my actual boss. He'd messaged me to remind me about a meeting we had scheduled for the following morning, which I had completely forgotten about. He also mentioned that he needed a report from me by the end of the day. Here's where things get truly messed up. While I was in the middle of replying to Greg's message, my phone buzzed again with a new notification. I instinctively swiped down to see what it was, and, I kid you not, it was the exact same meme that I had originally sent to my friend earlier. I had, for some inexplicable reason, sent the meme to Greg, again. This time, I was absolutely certain I had selected Greg's contact. There was no mistake. I had clicked on his name, and there was no way this could be a mistake. I had to have sent it to him intentionally, right? So what did I do? I tried to play it off. Sorry, I meant to send that to my friend. I texted Greg immediately, my heart racing. But the damage was already done. I waited for what felt like an eternity, then saw the 3 little dots pop up on my phone. My stomach dropped. When the message finally came through, it wasn't what I expected. It was a simple, haha, nice meme. Let me know when the report's ready. I could hardly believe it. Greg had actually replied like it was no big deal. I was so relieved that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But then, later that evening, I received another message from him. You sure you meant to send that to me? At this point, I had no idea how to respond. My mind was racing. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely joking or if he was about to start grilling me for being unprofessional. So, I decided to be upfront. Yeah, honestly, I messed up. I sent it to you by accident. I was trying to send it to a friend. It was meant to be a joke. Sorry if it came off weird. There was a long pause. Then Greg's reply came. No worries. I didn't think it was weird. But just so, you know, if you want to send me memes, they better be top-tier content, alright? It was one of those moments where I didn't know whether to laugh or be mortified. I guess Greg was cool about it, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had just ruined my professional image by sending him a stupid dog meme about a dude's failed dinner date. The next day, we had the meeting and it went fine. In fact, Greg was in a good mood, and I even managed to get a compliment on a report I'd worked on the week before. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel like I had just crossed some invisible line between professionalism and personal stupidity. So yeah, I accidentally sent an embarrassing meme to my boss twice in one day. And somehow, it didn't blow up in my face. But I can't help but wonder how many more accidental mistakes I can get away with before my reputation is completely ruined. Moral of the story: double-check who you're sending your memes to, especially if you're sending them to your boss. Also, maybe try to keep the content a little more appropriate, just in case. TIFU by accidentally sending a super embarrassing text to my boss instead of my girlfriend. So, here's the thing. I've never really been great at multitasking, but I've always managed to get by. I work in marketing at a medium-sized tech company, and the job is usually pretty chill: emails, meetings, brainstorming, and the occasional presentation. Nothing that would make you sweat, unless you're dealing with a tight deadline or a really fussy client. I had just finished a long meeting with a particularly demanding client. I was drained, mentally exhausted, and needed a quick mental break before diving into the next set of emails. So, I grabbed my phone to send a quick message to my girlfriend. We had been joking all morning about a silly inside joke we have, and I was looking forward to sending her a text that would make her laugh. We've been dating for about a year now, and like all couples, we have our goofy, playful moments. At the same time, I was also trying to send an important email to my boss about the next phase of a project. He's one of those always-on types, constantly sending messages, checking in, and just being a general ball of energy. The kind of person who expects fast responses at all hours. So, I had already written the email to him and was about to hit send when I got distracted by a notification from my girlfriend. In my exhausted state, my brain told me to send a quick message to her before I responded to my boss. I opened my messages and started typing. Hey babe, I can't stop thinking about that thing we talked about last night. I'm still dying laughing at how ridiculous it was, faced with tears of joy. I love you. Then I hit send, or at least I thought I did. Here's where I screwed up. I had multiple apps open, and I had already typed a message for my boss. I wasn't paying attention at all, and just assumed that when I went to send the message, I was sending it to my girlfriend. But no. I had actually sent that text to my boss. At first, I didn't notice. I just went back to what I was doing, responding to emails, checking a few reports. It wasn't until I heard my phone buzz again that I realized something was off. I picked it up, and there it was, the notification. Boss, what's so funny? I don't get it. My heart sank. I froze. I thought, oh God, oh no, this is bad. Really bad. Immediately, I opened the message thread, praying I hadn't actually sent that text, but of course I had. The message was sitting there, completely visible. Hey babe, I can't stop thinking about that thing we talked about last night. I'm still dying laughing at how ridiculous it was, faced with tears of joy. I love you. Now, let me clarify something. My boss is a 45-year-old man. He's not the type of guy you casually joke with. He's professional, sometimes even a little stiff, and definitely doesn't seem like someone who would ever respond to a text like that. I could feel my face turning red, my palms starting to sweat. The worst part was knowing I couldn't take it back. I panicked. I quickly opened the thread to my boss and started typing furiously. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I meant to send that to my girlfriend, not you." But as soon as I typed it, I realized it was still incredibly awkward and honestly, even worse. Now, it looked like I was scrambling to cover up something that wasn't even believable. I mean, who sends a message like that to their girlfriend? That thing we talked about last night? What thing? It didn't make sense. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, but I had to do something. So I typed again. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was totally meant for someone else. I'm super embarrassed." And then, to add an even more awkward layer, I hit send. At this point, I was just hoping he would ignore it. But, of course, my boss doesn't ignore things. He's the kind of guy who notices every little detail, which is probably why he's the boss. He immediately responded. "What thing? Can you explain?" I read that message, and it was like a punch to the gut. I could feel the sweat on my forehead, and my mind raced for a decent explanation. But there was no way to explain that text in a way that wouldn't make me seem like a total creep. There was no getting out of this. So, I just sat there for a moment, staring at my phone, paralyzed. Finally, I sucked it up and just sent a straight-up apology. "I'm so sorry. That was meant for my girlfriend. Please disregard everything I just said." It was a mistake. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a calendar invite from my boss for a one-on-one meeting in his office later that afternoon. I was about to die. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. I tried to go about my day, but it felt like everyone knew something was off. My coworkers kept glancing at me in that way that says, "What did you do?" But no one said anything. At 3 p.m., I walked into my boss's office. He was sitting at his desk, already looking at his computer, and he just waved me in without saying a word. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Do you want to explain yourself?" he asked, his voice completely neutral. I couldn't help it. I just blurted out, "I'm so sorry I sent that message to you by mistake. It was supposed to be for my girlfriend. I swear, it's not what it looks like." I paused and added, "I know it was super unprofessional, and I totally understand if you want to take some kind of action or discipline me. But I promise, it's not as bad as it looks. I'm just an idiot." There was a long pause. Then he cracked a smile. "Dude, I can't believe you just sent me that," he said, shaking his head. "But, I mean, it happens. I've sent some pretty weird texts to the wrong people before. Just don't do it again, okay?" I was stunned. He was actually laughing. He didn't seem upset at all. "Thanks for being cool about it," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. But that wasn't the end. As I walked out of his office, I glanced at my phone to see a message from my girlfriend. "OMG, I just saw your text to your boss, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy." "What did you say?" I sat down in my chair, buried my face in my hands, and just groaned. The worst part? My boss replied to me with a text that read, "Maybe you should rethink that thing you talked about last night," winking-faced. So, yeah, TIFU by sending my boss a super embarrassing text meant for my girlfriend, and now I'll never live it down. TIFU by accidentally sending a picture of my naked butt to my boss. I never really thought my life would come to a point where I'd have to explain why a picture of my naked butt was sent to my boss. But here we are. This is my tale of how I managed to embarrass myself so deeply that I'm still cringing just thinking about it. It all started on a regular Wednesday. I was working from home, sitting on the couch in my pajamas, with my laptop in front of me. It was a slow day, no urgent meetings, no crazy deadlines. Just a whole lot of emails and minor tasks to take care of. A perfect day to casually scroll through Instagram while I worked. Maybe take a break and grab some lunch in a bit. Life was good. But then, a text message came through on my phone. It was from my best friend, Sarah. We had a running joke about body positivity and fitness, and she had just sent me a meme about squats. The meme was funny, and I wanted to reply with something just as funny. So, I quickly scrolled through my gallery to find the perfect picture of me in workout gear. I had just recently taken a picture after a gym session, showing off my toned but, well, as toned as it gets for someone who barely works out, to send to Sarah as a joke. Now, let me tell you, I am not someone who ever takes nude photos or anything like that. So, when I scroll through my gallery, I mostly find food pics, vacation shots, and some random selfies. But on this particular day, I made a mistake. You see, when I was preparing for a particularly brutal squat session, I had taken a picture of myself from behind to check my form in the mirror. A harmless photo, right? Well, maybe not so much. The photo wasn't meant for anyone but me, just a way to gauge whether I was actually working my glutes as much as I thought. But in my haste to find a suitable picture for Sarah, I accidentally clicked the wrong image. In my mind, I was thinking I'd be sending her the meme, but instead, I sent her the picture of my naked butt. For a moment, I didn't realize my mistake. I thought it was just a blur of my workout leggings, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I quickly hit send, closed my phone, and went back to typing an email. It wasn't until about 5 minutes later that my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sarah, with a string of laughing emojis. OMG, what's this? Is this your new workout pic? She texted. At first, I had no idea what she was talking about. I opened the message, and there it was, my butt in full view. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had sent her the wrong picture. And not just any picture, but a picture of my bare, unashamed butt. Immediately, I started texting her back, trying to salvage what I could. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That wasn't meant for you.
I didn't mean to send that.
Sarah, ever the jokester, just laughed it off, sending back a reply that said, I mean, it's a great pic, but not exactly what I was expecting.
Great.
Just great. But here's where the real nightmare started. In a panic, I quickly deleted the photo from our conversation, hoping that it had disappeared forever. But Sarah, being the tech-savvy person she is, already had it saved. She then decided it was time to make the situation even worse by making a joke out of it in our group chat. Our group chat, which included me, her, a couple of close friends, and wait for it, my boss, Greg.
Yes.
My boss, Greg. It turns out, in all the stress and chaos of my morning, I had mistakenly sent the picture to our group chat, not just Sarah. To be honest, I didn't even notice Greg had been added to the conversation until I saw his name pop up. My stomach dropped as I saw his response. Nice form. Did you get that from the office, Jim? The group chat erupted with laughter, as everyone seemed to find it hilarious that I had sent an accidental nude to the entire crew, including my boss. But Greg? He just kept making comments about how good my squats were looking and how I should stop by the office gym to teach everyone my secrets. I was absolutely mortified. How could I ever face him again? How could I look him in the eye after he had seen a full view of my backside? I spent the rest of the day in a state of disbelief. Every time my phone buzzed, I would open it with dread, waiting for more comments about my ass. My stomach churned every time I saw Greg's name. How was I supposed to show up to work tomorrow? What was I supposed to say when I saw him? It wasn't until later that afternoon that Greg finally texted me privately. My heart raced. I opened the message and there it was, "Hey, don't worry about the pic. It was a good one. Just make sure you don't accidentally send anything like that again, haha." All jokes aside, nice job on the form. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Was he being serious? I had no idea how to respond. Did he really just brush it off like that? Was he just being professional to avoid making things more awkward? Either way, I didn't know how to react. But after that, I realized that he wasn't making a huge deal out of it. I still couldn't shake the embarrassment, though. I went to bed that night replaying the moment over and over, imagining all the ways it could have gone wrong. What if he had reported it to HR? What if I had actually gotten fired for the accidental butt pic? Luckily, I didn't lose my job over a bum photo. The next day at work, I walked into the office, trying to act casual. Greg was there, smiling and giving me a nod as I walked by. He didn't mention the picture once. In fact, the whole thing was barely acknowledged again, and life continued as usual. But every time I see Greg, I can't help but think about how, at one point, he had seen my bare ass. It's something I'll never forget. So, yeah, TIFU by sending a picture of my naked butt to my boss. At least I've learned to double-check before sending anything, especially when it's a photo of my butt. Let's just hope the next time I make a mistake, it's not as embarrassing as this one. TIFU by sending my boss an inappropriate message meant for my friend, and now I'm paying the price. So, here's the deal. I'm a 28-year-old guy working at a small tech company. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and the people I work with are chill. My boss, let's call him Greg, is a pretty laid-back guy. He's in his 40s, and we get along pretty well. He's the kind of boss who doesn't hover over your shoulder but also expects things to get done on time. I'd even say we had a kind of casual, friendly rapport. At least, that's what I thought. Now, I'm not the most responsible person when it comes to work emails. I mean, I'm professional and all, but I tend to be more casual with my colleagues. We often send each other memes or funny videos over Slack, and sometimes the conversation shifts to more personal topics, which is fine. But here's the thing. I've been in a weird mood lately. I've been dealing with some personal stuff, and it's been messing with my head. To cope, I've been texting my best friend about everything, venting, complaining, just unloading my thoughts. My friend's been great, always there to listen and offer advice. And we've developed a bit of a habit of joking around about things, sometimes crossing the line into darker humor. So, on this particular day, I was feeling especially stressed out. I had been working on a really frustrating project for a client that had a lot of last-minute requests, and I felt like I was being micromanaged by Greg, even though I know he's just trying to keep things moving forward. But at that moment, I was really fed up. The kind of fed up where you need to vent, but you also want to throw in a little bit of humor to make the pain less real. I grabbed my phone and decided to fire off a quick message to my friend to blow off some steam. Now, before I go any further, let me explain something. I have 2 email accounts on my phone, one for work and one personal. And because I do a lot of multitasking, sometimes I get mixed up between the two. I've accidentally sent personal emails to my work account more than once, but luckily, those were just a few casual messages to friends and nothing embarrassing. This time, however, my mistake was much bigger. I was so caught up in my frustration and the need to vent that I didn't double-check which account I was using. I quickly typed out a message to my friend, which read something like this. God, I'm so fed up with Greg. I swear, every time he asks for a report, it's like he's trying to micromanage me. Does he not realize how much of a pain in the ass he is? I swear, if he asks me for another update on this stupid project, I'm going to lose my mind. At this point, I'm just waiting for him to say, Hey, can you move your whole life around to make this work? Because I'll do it. I'll show up in a clown suit if that's what it takes. Yeah, it was a pretty harsh message. I get that now, and I'll admit it wasn't exactly respectful. But I was frustrated, and in the moment, it felt like a harmless way to vent. My friend was always there to back me up, and I knew she'd find it funny. And here's where the nightmare begins. I accidentally sent that message to Greg, my boss, instead of my friend. I didn't even notice at first. I was still fuming, distracted by the chaos of my day, so I just continued working. About 5 minutes later, I got a reply from Greg. Are you serious, my name? What is this about? I froze. My stomach dropped. My heart started racing. I immediately looked at my phone, and sure enough, there was the message I had just sent, staring back at me in Greg's response. I wanted to crawl under my desk and disappear. I was mortified. I quickly tried to come up with some sort of excuse. I even started typing a reply that went something like, Oh, sorry, I meant to send that to my friend. It was a joke, just venting. I really didn't mean to disrespect you. But I paused. If I sent that, it would just make things worse. Greg would know I was trying to cover my tracks. I had to own up to it. So I just decided to be honest and replied with, I'm really sorry, Greg. That was meant for a friend. I was frustrated and venting, but I absolutely respect you, and I shouldn't have said anything like that. The next few hours felt like an eternity. Greg didn't respond immediately, which made it worse. I kept refreshing my inbox, hoping for a sign that he wasn't actually as mad as I thought he was. My mind was racing with worst-case scenarios. Was he going to fire me? Was I going to be reprimanded? Would I have to leave the company in disgrace? Around lunchtime, Greg finally replied, I appreciate you owning up to it. We all have our moments, but I expect professionalism from everyone. Let's talk more about this later. That let's talk more about this later part wasn't exactly comforting. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus, but all I could think about was the conversation that was coming. I couldn't stop imagining how awkward it would be. What if Greg was secretly furious, but just didn't want to make a scene at work? What if he had already told HR, and I was about to be dragged into some uncomfortable meeting? The meeting came later that afternoon, and to my surprise, Greg wasn't angry. In fact, he was pretty calm about it. He told me that everyone has moments of frustration and that he understood I was just venting. He said he appreciated my honesty and that we all needed to find better ways to cope with stress. But then he hit me with something that made me even more embarrassed. I know you and I have a relaxed vibe, but this kind of stuff can affect how people see us. Not just you, but me too. If we're going to keep this relationship professional, we both need to set a better example. I don't want you to feel like you can't be yourself, but there's a line. I nodded along, feeling like a total idiot. The whole thing was awkward, but I appreciated that Greg wasn't trying to make it worse than it was. He did suggest that I should consider taking a mental health day, which I didn't take as a dig at me, but more like an offer to clear my head. I don't know if Greg was just being kind because he's a decent guy, or if he really wasn't as bothered by it as I thought. Either way, the damage was done. I learned a hard lesson about keeping my personal frustrations separate from work. And the worst part? I still had to explain everything to my friend later that night. I don't think she's ever going to let me live this down. So, yeah, that was my screw-up. I'm still here, I still have a job, and Greg and I are on good terms. But I'm going to be much more careful with my phone in the future. And if you ever find yourself venting to a friend, double-check that you're not sending it to your boss instead. Trust me, you'll thank me later. TIFU by accidentally sending a message to my boss that was meant for my friend, and it's now completely ruining my career. It all started a few weeks ago when I got a new job at a company that I was honestly excited about. The role was a step up from my previous job, and I was thrilled to finally be working in an environment where I could grow. My boss, let's call him Kevin, was a nice enough guy, professional, well-spoken, a little awkward, but overall, a decent boss. We had some casual conversations here and there, but nothing that stood out as particularly personal. Everything seemed to be going well, or so I thought. The first few weeks of the job were a blur of training, learning new systems, and trying to make a good impression. It was stressful, but I knew I was capable. I had a few slip-ups here and there, but I always managed to fix them before they became problems. One day, I was particularly exhausted. I had stayed up late trying to meet a deadline, and I could barely keep my eyes open at work the next day. It was one of those days where every email felt like an essay, and every phone call felt like a marathon. At lunchtime, I decided to take a quick break. I had just gotten a text from my friend, and we were talking about the usual, work, life, and how exhausted we both were. I messaged him saying, "I am so over this job, man. Kevin is such a pain in the ass. He's constantly micromanaging everything, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time." That felt good to say. I had been holding it in for weeks, not wanting to come off as ungrateful or negative to my colleagues. But after a few weeks of feeling like I could barely breathe under Kevin's watchful eye, it was nice to let it out. Then came the unfortunate part. I was sitting in the break room, scrolling through my phone while shoveling down a sad sandwich, when I saw that Kevin had messaged me. It was a quick, "Hey, can we chat about the presentation after lunch?" I quickly typed a response back saying, "Sure, I'll be in my office in 10. Now, I don't know if it's the exhaustion or just the sheer stress of everything, but instead of responding to Kevin's message, I went straight back to texting my friend. I quickly typed a new message that was meant for my friend and was venting about my boss again. Ugh, I swear to God, Kevin just can't leave me alone. He's always breathing down my neck. I can't stand working with him. I'm going to lose my mind if he doesn't back off. You can probably guess where this is going." I went to send the message. Without thinking, my thumb hovered over the send button, and I tapped it. But in my exhausted state, I didn't stop to double-check the recipient. I was so used to chatting with my friend, and the text box was already populated with Kevin's name from our earlier conversation. I didn't even think twice about it. I sent the message. It wasn't until about 30 seconds later that the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My stomach dropped, and I almost choked on my sandwich. I quickly checked my phone, and sure enough, there it was, my venting message. now sitting in Kevin's inbox, waiting for him to read it. In a panic, I immediately started typing another message, trying to explain myself. "Oh my God, Kevin, I didn't mean that. I was just venting to a friend. I didn't mean it, I promise." But I was already too late. I watched as those dreaded threats appeared, signaling that Kevin was typing a reply. The wait felt like hours. The whole office could have been on fire, and I would have felt less anxious than I did at that moment. Finally, Kevin's message came through. "Can we chat after lunch?" That was all it said. And that's when I realized it was going to be a long afternoon. I spent the next half hour agonizing over what to do. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I went through every possible way to salvage the situation, but nothing felt like it would work. I even considered calling in sick, but that would have just made everything worse. I had to face Kevin. I had no choice. When I walked into his office after lunch, he was sitting there with his arms crossed, staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. He looked disappointed, and that was worse than any anger he could have shown. "Have a seat," he said in a calm, collected tone that did nothing to calm my nerves. I sat down, trying to muster up some semblance of confidence, but I could feel my hands shaking. Kevin looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I saw your message. The one you sent about me." My heart sank into my stomach. I had no idea what to say. I wanted to apologize, to explain, to beg him to understand that it was a mistake, but my words felt stuck in my throat. He continued, "I know work can be stressful, but it's a little disappointing to hear. I thought we had a good working relationship, and I understand that I might come across as micromanaging at times, but you need to understand that it's part of the job. I'm just trying to help you succeed." I nodded, my throat dry, unable to get any words out. I just wanted to disappear. After a long, awkward silence, Kevin finally sighed. "Look, I'm not going to fire you for a mistake, but I need you to be more mindful of how you communicate, especially with me. If you have concerns, come talk to me directly. I can't have this kind of thing happening again." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was overshadowed by embarrassment and shame. I had just gotten this job, and I was already on thin ice. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that I had sent the message or the fact that Kevin now knew exactly how I felt about him. I couldn't believe I had let myself get so careless. The worst part? Kevin didn't even seem angry. He was just disappointed. And that was the worst thing he could have said. After that day, things have been awkward. I try to keep my interactions with Kevin professional, but I can't help but feel that everything I do now is under a microscope. I'm constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if he's judging me or if he's just waiting for me to mess up again. I've tried to keep my head down and do my work, but I can't shake the feeling that my career here might be over before it even really started. So, yeah, TIFU by sending a message to my boss that should have gone to my friend. It might have been a small mistake, but it's had big consequences. Now, I'm left trying to rebuild my reputation, one awkward conversation at a time. If you ever feel the urge to vent about your boss, please, for the love of all that is holy, make sure you're texting the right person. I'll never make that mistake again. This happened a few weeks ago, and honestly, I'm still cringing every time I think about it. I'm in my late 20s, and I've been in a steady relationship for about 2 years. My girlfriend, Jenna, is amazing. She's beautiful, funny, and has this way of making every moment feel special. We've had our share of fun adventures and, like every couple, some awkward moments. But nothing could have prepared me for this particular mess-up. It all started one Friday night. Jenna and I were getting ready for a dinner party hosted by one of her friends, Olivia. Jenna had told me about the event for a couple of weeks, and I knew Olivia pretty well by this point. She's always been nice to me, but we aren't exactly close friends. Nevertheless, I was looking forward to the night because it meant getting to socialize, eat some good food, and spend quality time with Jenna. Jenna was in the bathroom getting ready, and I had just finished getting dressed. Now, I'm not the most fashionable guy, so I tend to rely on Jenna's judgment when it comes to picking out clothes. But on this particular night, I was feeling confident and decided to go for my own outfit choice, a semi-casual button-down shirt, dark jeans, and some nice boots. I thought I looked pretty good. Anyway, we were running late, as usual, and I was trying to do the final touches on my look. I stood in front of the mirror, checking myself out one last time, and then disaster struck. I felt a sudden sneeze coming on. I turned away from the mirror, but it was too late. A huge sneeze exploded out of me, and I instantly knew something was wrong. I looked down, and sure enough, there was a large stain of snot on my shirt. I panicked. I looked around for a tissue or something to wipe it off, but all I could find was a random paper towel from the bathroom counter. I grabbed it, dabbed the spot, and then looked in the mirror again. The snot stain was gone, but there was this lingering dampness in the fabric. It wasn't enough to make the shirt totally soaked, but it was noticeable, especially under bright lights. I was desperate, so I threw on a jacket to cover it up. The jacket did a decent job of hiding the wet spot, but I could tell it was still going to bug me all night. Jenna finally came out of the bathroom, looking gorgeous as usual. I could tell she noticed the jacket, but she didn't say anything. We rushed out the door and into the car, heading to Olivia's place. When we got there, I was already feeling self-conscious about my shirt and the whole situation. I was hoping that no one would notice, but of course, I immediately started making small talk with the other guests. Everyone was friendly, but I kept my arms crossed tightly, trying to hide the damp area on my shirt. The dinner party was a typical gathering. Everyone was having a good time, talking, drinking wine, and eating delicious food. I tried my best to keep my focus on the conversations around me, but my mind kept drifting to that darn shirt. Every time I moved, I could feel the wetness, and I started to feel like everyone could see it. About halfway through the evening, Jenna and I decided to take a break from the crowd and step out onto Olivia's balcony for some fresh air. I felt like I needed a moment to breathe, both literally and figuratively. We stood out there for a while, chatting about random things, and I started to feel a little bit better. But then something happened that completely made everything worse. A sudden gust of wind blew through the balcony, and before I could even react, my jacket flew open, exposing my shirt. Jenna caught a glimpse of it and immediately gave me a concerned look. "Babe, what's that on your shirt?" she asked. I panicked. "Oh, it's nothing. Just spilled some water earlier," I lied. Jenna wasn't convinced, but she didn't press the issue. She just smiled, trying to play it cool, but I could tell she was a bit uncomfortable. I decided that it was time to go back inside. We returned to the party, but I was now even more self-conscious. Every time I interacted with someone, I could see their eyes flickering toward my shirt. I was convinced they could all see it. Finally, near the end of the night, I was chatting with Olivia when she suddenly blurted out, "Hey, do you have a little, something on your shirt?" She pointed right at the damp spot. My heart sank. I thought I had been so subtle, but somehow it was obvious to everyone. I immediately tried to brush it off, but Olivia wasn't having it. "It looks like you sneezed on yourself." "It's fine, don't worry about it," she said, trying to lighten the mood. The room was silent for a second, and then everyone laughed. I chuckled awkwardly, but the laughter felt like it was directed at me. I felt the heat rising in my face, and I could feel my cheeks turning bright red. Jenna, ever the sweetheart, stepped in to help save me. "Oh my God, babe, you're so gross. You know how allergic you are to pollen," she said with a playful laugh. "He's probably been sneezing all day." I smiled weakly, grateful for her trying to cover for me. But at that moment, I realized something that would haunt me for the rest of the night. In my rush to hide the stain, I had failed to notice something far worse. There was still a faint smell of something. I couldn't place it exactly, but it was unpleasant. I don't know if it was from the wet fabric or if it was something more embarrassing, but I could feel the room subtly shift. For the rest of the evening, I did my best to avoid social interactions. Every time I saw someone glancing at me, I couldn't help but feel like they knew. That smell, combined with the dampness on my shirt, was slowly turning me into the joke of the party. When we finally left, Jenna gave me a sympathetic look as we walked to the car. "You're fine, babe," she said. "It's just a little accident." I sighed, feeling completely defeated. I thought I was going to be able to laugh it off, but honestly, it just felt like the worst thing ever. Jenna, being the amazing person she is, assured me that it was no big deal. But inside, I couldn't shake the embarrassment. That night was a disaster. It was one of those moments where everything that could go wrong did, and I just had to sit there, cringing and hoping no one remembered the snot shirt guy. Since that night, every time Jenna brings it up, I make a mental note to never try to be fashionable without consulting her first. And as for Olivia's party, let's just say I'm not in any rush to go back anytime soon. I'm just hoping the story about me isn't still being passed around. It's probably too late for that, though. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by taking my girlfriend to meet my parents for the first time and accidentally making her believe I was a secret agent. Let me give you some context. I've been dating my girlfriend, Jess, for about 6 months now. Things were going pretty great chemistry. We had lots of fun together, and our families hadn't really met yet, but I thought it was time. My parents are nice people, but they can be a little eccentric, and I wasn't sure how Jess would vibe with them. My dad is the type who always tries to impress people by acting like he's an expert on random things, and my mom, well, she's more of a I love you too much kind of person, which can be intense. But still, I figured it would be fine. I'd been talking about Jess to my parents for a while now, so they were really excited to meet her. It was a Saturday afternoon when we all decided to meet at my place, casual, nothing fancy. I didn't think anything could go wrong. Well, let me tell you how wrong I was. First, my dad gets this idea to show off his cool gadgets. He has this weird obsession with survivalist stuff and military-grade gear. He's never been in the military, but he watches a lot of documentaries, and that's kind of the vibe he tries to give off. So when Jess arrives, my dad's already trying to be the alpha by showing off a few things that are definitely not normal. He starts by pulling out this massive, intimidating-looking bag from under the coffee table. Jess gives me a confused look, and I just shrug. Dad opens it, and it's full of these high-tech, tactical-looking tools, binoculars, a portable drone, a tactical flashlight, you name it. He starts showing her how to use them, explaining the features as though he's training her for some secret mission. I can see Jess is a little taken aback, but is trying to be polite, nodding along like she's interested. Then it happens. My dad, in an attempt to seal the deal of impressing her, leans in real close and says, "You know, these aren't just for show. They're part of a larger setup. In case of emergencies." Jess laughs nervously, not sure if he's joking. My dad's face is completely serious. "Emergencies?" she asks.
Yeah.
"In case things get a little out of hand," my dad says, lowering his voice like he's about to reveal a government secret. "I have some connections. You know, classified stuff. Not to mention some of these gadgets are very useful in situations where you need to keep a low profile." At this point, I'm sitting there thinking, oh no, what is he doing? I try to intervene, but my dad is already deep into his spiel. Some of these devices, he continues, could make it easier to track people, intercept communications, and get out of tight situations. If you know what I mean. He glances at me with a wink like he's just dropped a bombshell. Jess is looking at me now, her eyes wide, and I can tell she's starting to connect some dots. "Wait, what? You're telling me you have, like, secret agent gadgets?" "Not me," my dad responds, suddenly getting a little more intense. "But you'd be surprised how many people in this world need to know how to use these tools. People who work in special industries. You ever hear of espionage?" Jess's face slowly turns from confusion to utter disbelief. She glances at me, clearly wondering if I've been hiding some sort of mysterious double life. I start sweating. "Espionage? As in you're a spy?" Jess asks, her voice quiet but almost fascinated. I quickly try to cut in. No. I'm not a spy. What he means is..." But before I can finish, my dad looks at me with this sly grin. "Actually, your boyfriend is a bit of a sleeper agent himself, you know. I'd be careful, Jess. You never know who you're dealing with. Some people have double lives." I feel like my world is collapsing in on itself. Jess stares at me, wide-eyed.
Wait.
"You're not actually," she starts. I start to panic, my mind racing. No. He's just messing with you. My dad likes to joke around about things like this. I'm not a spy, I promise. But Jess isn't convinced. My dad's little performance has made it seem like I'm some kind of James Bond wannabe, and there's no way I can dig myself out of this hole. Wait, hold on, she says, still eyeing me suspiciously. Are you going to tell me that this whole thing is just a coincidence? The weird texts you've been getting at odd hours? Your business trips where you're always so vague about where you're going? I freeze. How does she know about those? Oh, come on, Jess continues, her voice trembling a bit now. That time you had to go to that meeting at 2 a.m. and didn't tell me what it was about? What was that? My stomach drops. I swear, Jess, it's nothing. I told you those were just work things. I'm not a spy. I'm just a regular guy. But she's not buying it. My dad, seeing the situation escalating, adds more fuel to the fire. I wouldn't be surprised if he's been activated already.
They do that sometimes.
They don't tell you until it's too late. Jess looks at me, her face a mix of confusion and concern. So, what? You're working for some top-secret organization? Are you being paid to do covert missions? Is that why you're always so mysterious? I'm not a spy, I shout almost too loudly. But it's too late. Jess is convinced. I think I need to go, she says, standing up quickly. I need to think about this. I try to stop her, but she's already heading toward the door. My dad, apparently oblivious to the chaos he's caused, gives me a thumbs up and says, "Don't worry, son. You'll work it out. Just be careful who you trust." Jess walks out of the door, and I stand there, absolutely defeated. I know I've got to explain myself, but how can I? She thinks I'm some sort of undercover agent now. I spend the rest of the day texting her nonstop, trying to explain how my dad is just a weird, eccentric guy who gets off on making everything sound like a spy movie. I told her it was all a joke. Eventually, after hours of texts and a long phone call, Jess finally believes me. She admits that she was a little freaked out but assures me that she gets it now. We laugh about it eventually, but I've learned my lesson. Next time, I'll make sure my dad keeps his spy stories to himself. Moral of the story, don't let your dad talk about secret gadgets when you're introducing your girlfriend to the family. It might lead to some very awkward, unexpected situations. TLDR, took my girlfriend to meet my parents. Dad showed off military gadgets and made it seem like I was a secret agent. Girlfriend freaked out, thought I was a spy. Had to spend hours convincing her I'm just a regular guy. So I had been chatting with this girl on and off for a few weeks, and after a few dates, we decided to take things to the next level. I had never been in a long-term relationship before, but things were going well, and I thought, hey, I can totally impress her with my cooking skills. Women love a guy who can cook, right? I was wrong. So wrong. I'm not a professional chef or anything, but I can hold my own in the kitchen. I've watched a lot of cooking shows, and I know my way around a few simple recipes. I had seen a recipe for a romantic candlelit dinner for two online: chicken marsala, mashed potatoes, roasted veggies, and a fancy salad. Easy enough, right? Yeah, no. So, I make the plan. I'll cook, and she'll be impressed by my culinary prowess. I decide to go all out. The recipe looks relatively simple. Just a bunch of chicken breasts, some mushrooms, and a bottle of marsala wine. How hard could it be? I head to the grocery store, and as soon as I step inside, I realize that I have no idea what I'm doing. First, I spend 15 minutes standing in front of the chicken section, trying to figure out if I need boneless, skinless, or what kind of chicken breasts I need. I feel like I'm doing some kind of chicken breast trivia. Then, I get to the wine aisle and have a mini panic attack because I have no idea what marsala wine is. I pick up a bottle that looks fancy enough, hoping it's the right one. At this point, I'm feeling pretty confident that I can pull this off, despite my complete lack of experience in the kitchen. I get back home, set the mood by lighting some candles, come on, it's a romantic dinner, and start setting up. I've got my chicken, wine, and veggies laid out, and I'm ready to begin. The first step is to cook the chicken, so I start by heating up some oil in a pan. I realize about 10 minutes in that I have no idea how to cook chicken properly. I Google it and find out that it's supposed to be seared on both sides. I give it a shot, hoping for the best. As I'm trying to sear the chicken, I also realize I've made the mistake of not prepping anything else in advance. So now I'm scrambling around trying to chop potatoes for the mash, cut up veggies for the roasting, and get everything together at the same time. I managed to burn the chicken a little. I think it's the pan that's too hot, but I'm not sure. But I move on because I'm too focused on getting everything else ready. Fast forward about 45 minutes later, and I've finally got everything on the stove or in the oven, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. But here's where things start to go sideways. The recipe says that after searing the chicken, I need to deglaze the pan with Marsala wine to make a sauce. Simple, right? I pour the wine in, but instead of the gentle simmer the recipe calls for, I end up with this huge flare-up of flames shooting out of the pan. For a split second, I freeze and think, okay, maybe this is how it's supposed to be? But nope. I'm pretty sure my kitchen is on fire at this point. I panic. I grab the nearest towel, which of course is the dish towel I use to wipe my hands, and I frantically try to put the flames out by waving it around. In my haste, I knock over a glass of water, which just makes everything worse because now I have wine, oil, and water everywhere. The flames keep growing. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm about to become the person that my date will forever associate with, that time he nearly burned down his kitchen. I don't know what to do. I can't even remember the fire safety tips they taught me in elementary school. I start running around the apartment, looking for something to put the fire out, but I realize I've made a huge mistake. I don't have a fire extinguisher. Now I'm panicking. I've got a fire in the pan, flames rising higher, the entire kitchen smelling like burnt chicken, and no idea how to stop it. In my freak out, I somehow knock over the candle I had set on the counter, which just adds to the chaos. And then, in my panic, I hear a knock at the door. I freeze. I can't let her see what's happening. I don't even know how to play this off. The fire alarm is going off at full blast, the kitchen is a disaster, and I'm literally just standing there, staring at the flaming pan. But I can't let her know how bad it is, right? So I take a deep breath, gather what little composure I have left, and run to the door. I open it, trying my best to look calm, but I can tell she immediately senses something is wrong. She looks at me, glances over at the kitchen where I'm almost positive she can hear the smoke detector blaring, and asks, "Are you okay?" I try to give her a reassuring smile, but it probably looks like I'm about to break down in tears. I tell her everything's fine, no big deal, just a little smoke. I'm totally in control here. At this point, she starts to look around, and it's clear that I can't hide this disaster anymore. The fire alarm is still going off, and I'm pretty sure the entire apartment smells like a mixture of burnt chicken, wine, and panic. I finally admit defeat. Okay, so, I think I might have set the kitchen on fire, I confess. She laughs, but it's more out of sympathy than anything else. I don't blame her. I tell her to come in, and we both stand there, looking at the pan that's now just an ugly black charred mess. She looks at me, then the mess, then back at me, and says, "Well, at least you tried?" I'm not sure if she's being kind or if she's actually just being polite, but I take it as a small victory. She ends up helping me get everything under control. Thankfully, the fire didn't get worse, and the smoke finally starts to dissipate. We end up ordering takeout instead, and while it's not quite the romantic dinner I had envisioned, we still had a good time. In the end, I learned that maybe I should stick to ordering pizza on date night and leave the fancy cooking to the experts. I also learned that I should definitely buy a fire extinguisher. But mostly, I learned that trying to impress someone with your cooking skills when you have no idea what you're doing is a terrible, terrible idea. TLDR, tried to cook a fancy dinner for my date, nearly set the kitchen on fire, and ended up ordering takeout while she helped me clean up the mess. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire at a fancy dinner party and almost ruining my best friend's wedding proposal. So, I've always prided myself on being a somewhat decent cook. Not a chef by any means, but I can follow a recipe and make things turn out pretty well. Last weekend, I found myself in a situation that made me question all of my life choices. What started as a simple favor for my best friend turned into one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Let me give you a bit of background. My best friend, Mark, has been dating his girlfriend, Lily, for almost 5 years. They've been inseparable, and we've all been waiting for Mark to pop the question. He had it all planned out. A romantic dinner at a fancy restaurant, candles, soft music, the whole works. But here's the twist. He wanted it to be intimate and personal, so he asked me, his best friend, to help him set up a surprise dinner at his house for the proposal. I, of course, agreed without hesitation. I mean, how could I say no? This was his moment. I felt honored that he wanted me to help with such an important milestone in his life. Mark had already arranged for a private chef to prepare the main course, but he still needed help with appetizers and setting the mood. I volunteered to take care of that. Now, here's where I made my first mistake. I decided that I wanted to make everything myself. No catering, no store-bought stuff. I would make everything from scratch.
How hard could it be?
I mean, I've watched enough cooking shows to think I knew what I was doing. I went to the store and bought all the ingredients for a fancy appetizer spread, charcuterie boards, bruschetta, stuffed mushrooms, and some fancy cheese and crackers. Easy enough, right? I also decided to go a little extra and make a few dessert items too. I figured I'd impress Lily with my culinary skills and make the evening feel even more special. I spent hours preparing, making sure every detail was perfect. The evening of the proposal, Mark and I arrived at his house early to set everything up. The candles were placed around the living room, the lights were dimmed, and soft music filled the air. It was all coming together.
I felt pretty proud of myself.
The appetizers were laid out on the table, and I made sure the wine glasses were polished, and the table was set just so. I was feeling good. But then, in my infinite wisdom, I decided to use the kitchen to make one final dish, a warm cheese fondue that would serve as a nice interactive appetizer for them to enjoy while Mark prepared to pop the question. This is where things began to unravel. I had never actually made fondue before. I thought I could just melt the cheese and throw in the wine, and it would be perfect. I was working on it, stirring the cheese mixture, when I realized the fondue pot wasn't heating up fast enough. So, in a moment of frustration, I cranked up the burner on the stove and kept stirring. I could see the cheese starting to melt, but I also noticed a strange smell. Instead of realizing what was going wrong, I panicked and tried to adjust the heat even more. I didn't know at the time, but I had overfilled the fondue pot, and cheese was slowly spilling over the sides onto the burner. It was a small spill at first, but in my panic, I kept stirring and not paying attention to the mess. At this point, I was so focused on making sure the fondue turned out perfect, I didn't realize the fire that was slowly starting to catch underneath the pot. And then it happened. A small flame appeared on the burner, and within seconds, it was growing. I froze for a moment, my mind racing. What do I do? What do I do? I screamed internally. I grabbed the nearest towel and started slapping the flames, thinking I could put them out, but that only made it worse. The towel caught fire, and I quickly dropped it onto the kitchen floor. Now the fire was spreading. I frantically ran for the fire extinguisher, but as I went to grab it, I realized it was locked in a cabinet that was too high for me to reach. At that exact moment, I heard the front door open. Mark had returned with Lily, and they were walking into the living room, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding in the kitchen. In a panic, I yelled, "Mark, call 911." He rushed into the kitchen and was horrified to see the flames. Lily stood in the doorway, utterly confused, as I scrambled to find a way to put out the fire. Mark grabbed a nearby wine bottle and started trying to douse the flames, but it wasn't working. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mark managed to find the extinguisher and put out the fire. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but there was smoke everywhere and the kitchen now looked like a war zone. At this point, Lily was no longer looking at me like I was a helpful friend. She looked like she wanted to call off the entire proposal. And honestly, I don't blame her. I had just almost burned down the house, ruined the proposal, and made everything awkward. Mark stood there, his plans for a romantic, peaceful evening in ruins, staring at me in complete disbelief. But in true Mark fashion, he didn't lose his cool. He quickly reassured Lily that everything was fine, which, in fairness, wasn't exactly true, and promised her they'd still have a beautiful night. Despite the disaster, he decided to go ahead with the proposal. As they sat down for the rest of their meal, which had thankfully been rescued by the chef, Mark managed to pull out the ring and propose, and Lily, thankfully, said yes. The rest of the night was a blur of awkward conversations and apologies. I offered to pay for the damages and even try to help clean up, but Mark just kept telling me to stop. The fire extinguisher foam was all over the kitchen, and we all spent an hour trying to get rid of the smell of burnt cheese. It was a mess. In the end, everything turned out fine. Mark and Lily are now engaged, and I still feel like an idiot for almost ruining their special moment. But I learned some important lessons that night. First, never attempt a new recipe on such an important occasion. Second, fire extinguishers should not be stored in hard-to-reach cabinets. And third, just because you're good at following a recipe doesn't mean you should try to make everything yourself. Most importantly, never underestimate the potential of melted cheese to start a disaster.
So yeah,
That's my TIFU. I accidentally started a fire, ruined a romantic evening, and almost ruined my best friend's proposal. I'm still recovering from the embarrassment, but at least they're engaged, even if it took a near fire for it to happen. I never considered myself a tech genius, but I figured I could handle basic texting. My phone and I had a long-standing relationship. We understood each other, and I was pretty comfortable using it, even with all the memes, emojis, and shorthand. So when I had a small but awkward conversation with my girlfriend earlier that day, I didn't think much of it. I had been texting her about plans for the weekend, mostly the usual stuff. Do you want to come over Saturday night? Maybe we can go to that Italian place you like for dinner? It was shaping up to be a pretty normal chat, with a little flirtation sprinkled in, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the part where she said, "I can't wait for you to see me in that dress. It's going to drive you crazy." I chuckled and responded with something playful, which I assumed would be enough to keep things lighthearted. "You know I'll lose my mind over you. I just hope I can control myself, haha." Now, in retrospect, I realized the choice of words was a little much, especially the lose my mind part. But hey, we were being flirtatious, and it felt fine at the time. I had no idea what would happen next. A few hours later, I'm sitting at home, scrolling through my phone while watching Netflix. My mom had been texting me nonstop about some family event happening next week, and I'd been ignoring her. I knew if I didn't reply soon, she would text me something like, "Are you ignoring me? Or you always do this? When are you going to grow up?" So I figured it was time to bite the bullet and respond. Without thinking too much, I opened the group chat with my mom and my sister. I quickly typed out something like, "Sure, I'll come to the event. I'll help with the food and whatever else you need." The message wasn't long, but it did the trick. I pressed send and set my phone down, returning to Netflix. And then it hit me. I saw my phone light up again. It wasn't the usual message notification. It was from my mom. She replied immediately. "Who is this for? Did you mean to send this to someone else?" I froze. Somewhere deep down, I knew that my phone had done something terrible. I didn't have to check the conversation to know what had happened. I had just sent that flirty text meant for my girlfriend. "You know I'll lose my mind over you and all," to my mom. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend how the hell I managed to do that. I went to grab my phone, my fingers trembling as I slowly opened the message thread with my mom and sister. Sure enough, there it was, my mom's text. "Who is this for? Did you mean to send this to someone else?" She had even responded with a crying laughing emoji. In the moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I panicked. I mean, what do you say in a situation like this? It wasn't just an innocent typo or autocorrect mistake. This was a full-blown disaster. I couldn't even begin to imagine how my mom was going to react. She wasn't exactly a conservative person, but she was old-fashioned in some ways, and this would be a lot for her. Trying to play it cool, I typed back quickly. Yeah, I meant to send that to someone else. Sorry, that was weird." The response came instantly. "Who are you texting like that? Is this some new relationship thing? Why am I just hearing about this?" At this point, I realized there was no way out. It was too late to deny what had happened. My mom had already figured out that I was texting someone in a romantic way. But she didn't know who it was, and I couldn't bring myself to tell her just yet. Instead, I replied, "It's nothing, just a friend."
I didn't mean to send that.
Then she hit me with the question I feared most. Why are you texting a friend like that? What happened to being serious? When I was your age, we didn't joke around like this. You don't even talk about your relationships with us anymore. Why are you being so distant? I could hear my mom's concern even through her text. I knew she wasn't trying to be judgmental, but it still stung. My stomach churned, and I realized that this small text mix-up was going to spiral into something much bigger if I didn't fix it fast. I had to come clean. I took a deep breath and then I texted her. Okay, I'll be honest. I've been seeing someone for a few months now. I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but now I was just waiting for the fallout. It was one thing to mess up with my own relationship, but now I had dragged my mom into the middle of it. There was no taking it back. What happened next, though, was even more unexpected. Instead of flipping out, my mom responded with, "Oh, well, that's a relief. I thought you were texting someone inappropriately, or something. If it's serious, though, I'm glad you're finally telling me." I was speechless. I had no idea my mom would be so understanding. I thought for sure I'd be grounded or at least given a long lecture about responsibility and relationships.
But no.
She was supportive, though I could tell she was still a little confused about the flirty nature of my texts. But honestly, that was the least of my concerns at that point. To make matters even weirder, my sister got in on the action. She had seen the conversation and thought it was hilarious. She immediately texted me. "Mom told me what happened. Seriously, dude, your text was so cringy. What were you thinking? Also, you totally need to introduce me to your friend since you're so serious now." I couldn't help but laugh at the situation. At this point, it was a family affair. My mom and sister were now both involved, and I was the butt of all their jokes. The worst part? It didn't stop there. I was still having to explain the full story to my girlfriend later that night. She had seen the text I'd sent, and was both confused and amused. I think we both learned a valuable lesson. Don't send flirtatious texts unless you're 100% sure of who you're sending them to. In the end, I managed to patch things up with my mom and sister, and my girlfriend was understanding about the whole ordeal. But I'll never forget the moment I realized that I'd accidentally sent a text meant for my girlfriend to my mom, and how that triggered a chain reaction that involved my entire family. I can only hope this becomes one of those stories we laugh about in the future, assuming, of course, that they never bring it up again. To full by accidentally ruining my best friend's wedding with a speech that I thought would be funny, but was a disaster. I've never been the life of the party. I'm one of those people who you can rely on to show up early, help set up, and leave just before the last guest finishes their dessert. But despite being somewhat introverted, I had somehow developed a reputation as the friend who loved to give a good speech. I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was because I'd done a couple of toasts at family gatherings and people always said I had a knack for it. They were wrong. I was excited when my best friend, Jenna, asked me to be her maid of honor. The first thing I thought was, great, I get to give a speech. The idea of standing up in front of a crowd and offering heartfelt words of wisdom about the couple's relationship made me a little nervous, but I figured it would be a perfect opportunity to showcase my comedic side and lighten the mood. I'm not the funniest person in the world, but I figured, hey, everyone loves a good laugh, right? Jenna and I had known each other for years. We met in college, where we bonded over shared interests like writing, obscure indie films, and drinking wine while complaining about the world. We went through all the ups and downs together, bad boyfriends, job struggles, family drama. When she met Ryan, her now husband, it felt like a match made in heaven. He was charming, funny, and kind. I loved him from the moment they introduced us, and I knew Jenna was in good hands. So, when she asked me to be her maid of honor, I took it as a huge honor. The wedding day arrived, and everything was perfect. The venue was beautiful, the weather was sunny, and Jenna looked stunning. Everything was going smoothly until the speeches started. I had written my speech a week before, read it over a dozen times, and practiced in front of my mirror. I even rehearsed with a few of my close friends to see if the humor landed. The reactions were always positive. I had a good mix of heartfelt moments and some lighthearted jokes, just enough to make people laugh, but not too much to overshadow the sincerity of the moment. It started off innocently enough. I stood up and thanked Jenna for choosing me to be her maid of honor. I spoke about our friendship and the times we'd shared over the years. People chuckled a little, and I could tell they were warming up to me. Then I shifted the focus to Ryan. I said how much I admired him for treating Jenna with such love and respect, and I mentioned how great it was to see her so happy. But then things took a turn. I decided to tell a funny story about how Jenna had always been the romantic one in our friendship. I recounted a tale from college when we had stayed up late watching chick flicks, and Jenna had said, "One day, I'm going to find a guy who treats me like the leading lady in one of those movies." Of course, I joked that at the time I had told her, "Yeah, and I'm going to find a guy who treats me like I'm the coolest person in the world." We both laughed at how unrealistic those expectations were. But the joke didn't land quite as I had hoped. I misjudged the tone. I was trying to be lighthearted, but I inadvertently made the moment about me instead of focusing on Jenna and Ryan. The room grew a little quieter, and I started to panic. So I decided to double down. I thought, I'll go for the big guns, and I proceeded to tell a story from high school about Jenna's first boyfriend, Matt. I know, not the smartest idea, right? But I thought it would be harmless. I figured it was a funny story about how awkward and clumsy Jenna was at the time. I even had a line prepared. Let's just say, when it came to relationships, Jenna wasn't exactly the poster child for How to Date 101. The crowd was laughing at first, but then the laughter turned nervous. I could see Jenna's face slowly turn from joy to discomfort. Her smile faltered, and I could tell she was starting to regret letting me speak. I thought I could salvage the moment, so I quickly added a joke about how her taste in men had dramatically improved over the years. Enter Ryan, the perfect man. But it was too late. Jenna's mom, who was sitting in the front row, shot me a look that could freeze fire. And then it hit me. I had made a terrible mistake. The entire room felt awkward. People were looking at each other, unsure whether to laugh or not. I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Ryan, bless him, tried to save the situation. He stood up and clapped lightly, trying to ease the tension, but his face said it all. He wasn't amused. I quickly wrapped up my speech, barely able to hold my composure. To Jenna and Ryan, may your love continue to grow, and may you never be as awkward as I was in high school. I finished, to the sound of a few polite chuckles that quickly faded into silence. I sat back down, trying to disappear into my seat, but Jenna wouldn't look at me. Her face was a mixture of confusion, embarrassment, and, I think, a little anger. Ryan looked like he was trying to hold back tears, not of happiness, but frustration. The rest of the evening went by in a blur. Jenna barely spoke to me. I tried to apologize, but she brushed me off with a weak smile each time. Ryan was cordial, but I could see the tension in his eyes. I was mortified. I had completely misjudged the moment and ruined what was supposed to be one of the most important and happiest days of Jenna's life. The next day, Jenna texted me saying we needed to talk. My stomach dropped. I spent the whole morning mentally preparing for the worst. When we finally met up, I apologized profusely. She told me she appreciated my speech, but she felt like I had embarrassed her and made a joke out of her relationship with Ryan. She said she understood I was trying to be funny, but it wasn't the time or place for those kinds of stories. I felt like an idiot. I promised I'd make it up to her. I spent the next few weeks doing everything I could to try to redeem myself. I bought her a thoughtful gift, wrote her a heartfelt letter, and even planned a girls' night to make up for the wedding fiasco. Slowly, we repaired our friendship, but it was never quite the same. Every time I saw Ryan, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I had ruined my best friend's wedding with an ill-timed attempt at humor. Moral of the story: don't try to make a wedding speech funny if you're not sure it'll land. Stick to heartfelt and sincere. It's not the time for embarrassing your best friend or yourself. So this happened about 3 weeks ago, and I'm only just now recovering emotionally enough to talk about it. I, 29M, was planning a surprise getaway for my girlfriend's birthday. She's really into quirky stuff like murder mystery dinners, goat yoga, escape rooms, that kind of thing. So I thought it would be cool to book a mystical forest retreat I found on Airbnb. The listing promised an immersive experience, disconnecting from the world and reconnecting with nature and the higher self. It had solid reviews, which I later learned were all suspiciously similar, and the photos showed people in white robes meditating around a campfire, eating farm-to-table meals, and smiling way too much. I booked it for the two of us for the weekend. She loved the idea. We packed light, left our phones in the glove compartment to embrace the experience, and drove 3 hours into the middle of nowhere. When we arrived, a woman named Serafina greeted us. That was already a red flag, but I was committed to the bit. She handed us linen robes and asked us to change in our yurt.
Yurt.
Cool, I thought. This is peak granola crunchy birthday material. We put on the robes, joined a group by a giant bonfire, and things were fine for about the first hour. We did a grounding circle. Everyone shared something they wanted to let go of. I made up something generic like my dependence on caffeine because I didn't want to look like a poser. They all nodded solemnly, like I had confessed to war crimes. Then came the cleanse. I assumed this was a juice cleanse or some sort of spa treatment.
Nope.
This was a soul cleanse, which involved screaming into the night sky until the darkness exits your vessel. People were shrieking like they were being murdered. My girlfriend was gripping my hand so hard, I thought she might break it. We made it through the first night. I chalked it up to intense roleplay and figured tomorrow would be chill.
Wrong.
Morning began with the awakening, where we were woken at dawn by banging drums and someone chanting in Latin or maybe Klingon. We were led, barefoot, through the forest to a cold river where we had to shed the binds of the modern world by washing with nature's tears. It was 42 degrees outside. I now had nature's hypothermia. Later that day, Serafina brought us to a tent called the Chamber of Illumination. Inside was a man named Father Soul, who was either 35 or 600 years old. Hard to say. He wore the same robe, but with a gold cord around his waist to show he was the boss, I guess. He sat us down and gave a 2-hour speech about how the skin cage limits the mind-soul, and how only through the binding could we reach ascension. I still thought this was an elaborate wellness retreat. That is, until my girlfriend nudged me and whispered, "I think this is a cult." I was still in denial, so I whispered back, "I think it's just a really intense Airbnb, LARP." But then we were asked to surrender any worldly possessions. Someone took my car keys and wallet to hold until you are free. They said it in a way that felt more like, until you escape or die. We were now officially freaking out. I tried to ask if we could leave early, but they redirected me to ceremonial duties, which was mostly chopping wood and preparing purity meals that consisted of raw root vegetables and a mysterious elixir that tasted like rainwater and regret. At night, things escalated. They started chanting about the flame of rebirth and brought out this giant wooden effigy. We thought maybe it was a Burning Man type ritual, until they said they needed 2 volunteers for the union. People looked at us. My girlfriend squeezed my hand and said very loudly, "We're leaving now." Father Soul smiled like a man who definitely has a bunker somewhere and said, "No one leaves until they are reborn." We ran. Literally sprinted in our linen robes, barefoot, through the woods. We had no phone, no GPS, nothing. We eventually made it to a ranger station after walking for almost 5 miles. The ranger gave us a ride back to our car, which, miracle of miracles, still had our phones in the glove compartment. I had 10 missed calls from my mom because she saw my last Instagram story about disconnecting and thought we had died in a bear attack. I reported the place to Airbnb, who removed the listing. The reviews turned out to be fake accounts. We also found out through a friend of a friend that the cult, yes, a real cult, has tried this trick a few times under different names. They move locations often. So yeah, I accidentally booked a cult for my girlfriend's birthday. She's mostly over it now, but occasionally she hums the creepy chant just to mess with me. We've agreed. Next year, we're just going to Disneyland. So this happened about a year ago, and I still get a cold sweat thinking about it. At the time, I was 23, working a dead-end retail job and going through what some might generously call an identity crisis. I dropped out of university twice, had moved back in with my parents twice, and was on track for a third when I decided, for reasons that even I can't fully explain, that I needed a fresh start. Not the kind where you move to a new city or take up yoga. No, I decided to become someone else entirely. It started innocently. I was hanging out at a bar near a university campus with my buddy Rob, watching a game. Some international students were there, and they were talking about how different life in the States was compared to back home. One of them mentioned how hard it was to make friends, how everyone just assumes you're some weird outsider. For whatever reason, probably liquid courage, I blurted out that I was an exchange student too. From Belgium, I said, which was the first European country that came to mind. I expected it to be a dumb lie that would last the night, but one of the girls in the group, Lisa, got really excited and said she was in a program that matched international students with locals to help them integrate and make friends. She insisted on introducing me to the group and taking my number. Drunk me was thrilled. Sober me woke up the next day to a text, "Can't wait to show you around," smiley face. At that moment, a very normal person would have just admitted the truth. Instead, I downloaded Duolingo and spent the next 3 hours Googling Belgian culture, Belgian student visa, and how to do a French accent. Yes, I know Belgium has Dutch too. I panicked. Fast forward 2 weeks, I developed a full-on alter ego, Theo van Linden, a computer science student from Ghent, here for 1 semester. I even made a fake student ID on Canva. I practiced my accent by watching hours of YouTube and mimicking phrases in the mirror like a lunatic. And somehow I pulled it off. Lisa introduced me to a bunch of her friends. They took me to parties, invited me to study groups, which I BS'd my way through by forgetting my laptop or faking confusion over assignments. I told them that in Belgium, lectures were structured differently and that I was struggling to adjust. They thought it was endearing. Within a month, I had a whole social circle that believed I was Theo. I even went on a couple of dates with a girl named Courtney, who thought my awkward European charm was adorable. We made out in the library once, right under a sign that said, "Academic honesty is our policy." Things were going alarmingly well. But here's where it all started to unravel. One night, we were all at this house party and someone brought out a karaoke machine. Courtney and Lisa convinced me to sing something in French. I don't speak French. Not even a little. I tried to sing La Vie en Rose, but halfway through, I forgot the lyrics, panicked, and started humming nonsense. People clapped, but someone in the back yelled, "That's not even French, man." I laughed it off and said I was from the Flemish part, but the damage was done. A week later, Lisa texted me saying she'd signed both of us up for an international student mixer, and that her cousin, who also studied in Belgium and spoke fluent French, would be there. I nearly vomited. I tried to back out. Said I had a stomach bug. She offered to bring me soup. I said I was contagious. She said she didn't care. At this point, I was too deep. I told her I'd go. The mixer was held in a conference room on campus, full of exchange students, actual exchange students. I tried to keep a low profile, sipping water and nodding politely. Then Lisa's cousin showed up. Her name was Camille, and the moment she greeted me in rapid-fire French, I froze like a deer in headlights. I responded with the only phrase I remembered, "Je suis désolée, je suis fatiguée." She frowned. "Are you okay?" she asked in perfect English. "You sound not Belgian." I mumbled something about regional dialects and fled to the bathroom. That night, I knew it was over. I couldn't keep the lie going. But I also didn't know how to come clean without everyone hating me. So instead, I ghosted them. All of them. I deleted my fake ID, blocked everyone's numbers, deactivated social media. I told Rob I'd been found out, and he just laughed for 10 straight minutes and said I was an idiot, which was fair. A week later, Courtney showed up at my work. I told her I worked part-time at a tech repair shop downtown. I actually worked the returns desk at a Target 20 minutes away. She must have done some serious sleuthing. She walked right up to me, eyes blazing, holding a return hair dryer like it was a weapon. "You're not Belgian," she said. I opened my mouth, but she kept going. You don't even go to school, do you? You lied about everything. Do you even know my last name? I didn't. Security had to escort her out because she refused to leave until I sang something in French. The aftermath was brutal. Lisa posted a whole thread on Twitter about the guy who catfished a campus pretending to be a European exchange student. It got like 80K likes. People were duetting it on TikTok. My real name wasn't in it, thankfully, but my face was. For weeks after, random customers would walk by me at Target and say, "Bonjour, Theo." One guy even brought in a French-English dictionary and asked for help with his homework. It was humiliating. I ended up quitting that job and moving cities. Again. I work remotely now, mostly in tech support, which is ironic considering I couldn't even fake being a tech student convincingly. I haven't lied about my identity since, unless you count pretending I enjoy Zoom calls. So yeah, TIFU by pretending to be an exchange student. I fooled a university, made out in a library under false pretenses, and got recognized as a French fraud in a Target break room. Learn from me. Or don't. Just maybe don't call yourself Theo if you can't pronounce croissant correctly. TIFU by pretending to be my girlfriend's dad for a week. So this all started because I'm the kind of guy who would rather lie elaborately than face mild social discomfort. My girlfriend, Lexi, had invited me to meet her family during a week-long reunion at her grandparents' lake house. I'd been dating her for about a year, and even though I'm usually pretty charming, she warned me that her dad was intense. Like former military, paranoid about government overreach, still believes the earth might be flat intense. I really like Lexi, so of course I agreed to go. But the night before we left, disaster struck. I chipped a tooth while eating popcorn and ended up at an emergency dentist appointment that took hours. When I called Lexi to tell her I'd be a bit late to the lake house, she paused and said, "That might actually work. My dad's been saying he wants to prank the rest of the family by not showing up right away, and you guys kinda look alike in a weird way. Same height, similar build, both have ridiculous beards." I laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. She explained her dad had left early that morning for a last-minute work thing and wouldn't be arriving until the end of the week. But he'd asked Lexi to pull a prank, have someone pretend to be him, just long enough to fool her extended family and stir up drama. Lexi, with the reckless confidence of someone who's never been emotionally scorched by a lie spiraling out of control, thought I was the perfect candidate. No one in my extended family has seen him in like 5 years. He's not on social media. Just be gruff, avoid questions, wear sunglasses and a ball cap, and grunt a lot. It'll be hilarious. Against every whisper of common sense in my brain, I agreed. We got to the lake house, and I met the whole family as her dad. I was introduced as Doug, the elusive, grumpy patriarch who'd finally emerged from the woods of Montana or wherever. Everyone was excited to see me. A few hugged me. One of her uncles got emotional and thanked me for my service. I did my best gravel-voiced, slightly nodding grunt, and said something cryptic like, "The forest gives more than it takes," which was apparently convincing because he started crying. Over the course of the week, things got complicated. First, Lexi's grandmother, a very sweet, very blind old woman, pulled me aside to talk about her will. She wanted to confirm that she was leaving her antique emerald brooch to me because I'd always appreciated its history. I didn't know what to do, so I said, "Of course," and kissed her forehead. Then Lexi's cousin, Ryan, asked me for career advice. He wanted to know if he should join a private security firm like you did after the Marines. I know nothing about private security, so I just went on a rant about structure over chaos and discipline being the cornerstone of free will. Ryan later told everyone I was the smartest man he'd ever met. I even got roped into a father-daughter boat race. I didn't know how to row. We lost terribly, and everyone joked that Doug must be getting old. But Lexi kept the act going like a champ, even faking frustration at my rowing. Then came the night everything burned down. Metaphorically. Almost literally. Lexi's actual dad, Doug, showed up. Not quietly. Not discreetly. He pulled up in a giant truck with a bald eagle decal on the side, honking the Star-Spangled Banner and wearing a tank top that said, "Taxation is theft." He had no idea that I was there impersonating him. You ever watch two dogs meet at a dog park and both immediately go stiff because they know only one of them is allowed to be alpha? It was like that, but with beards and camo cargo shorts. Lexi tried to intercept him, but he walked right into the middle of dinner and said, "What's up, fam?" Dead silence. 25 heads turned slowly to me. I said nothing. Just took a bite of mashed potatoes. Ryan looked from me to him and whispered, "There's two of them." Then Lexi stood up, voice high-pitched and panicked, and said, "Surprise. It was a prank. That's not really Dad, it's my boyfriend, Tyler." Gotcha. Laughter. Except not from everyone. Lexi's grandma started sobbing because she realized she'd given away her brooch to a stranger. Her aunt started praying loudly in Spanish. And Ryan? He screamed, "I told you all he was too philosophical," before storming off into the woods. Doug stared at me, then at Lexi, then back at me. "You pretended to be me?" I nodded. "Only a little bit." Doug said, "Did you sleep in my bed?" I said, "Only a little bit."
We were kicked out that night.
Lexi's mom actually threw a loaf of bread at the car as we left. I'm not sure if it was symbolic or just the first thing she grabbed. The worst part? I had started to like being Doug. There's something about being a mysterious ex-military woodsman who people respect just because he stares intensely into the middle distance and drinks coffee black. For one glorious week, I was a legend. Now I'm just Tyler again. A guy who can't row a canoe and will never be allowed within 500 feet of an emerald brooch. Lexi and I are still together, somehow, but her family refuses to acknowledge my existence. Her grandma now calls me the Shadow. Every so often, Ryan texts me quotes he attributes to fake Doug and says they inspire him to be a better man. So yeah, that's how I accidentally became a beloved war hero for 5 days and ruined a family reunion by existing. Would I do it again? Absolutely not. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.